Awesome. So good afternoon. I'm Magnus Graham. I'm a sexual assault prevention program coordinator here actually in Norfolk, Virginia. I work with a lot of our SARCs around the Coast Guard. I work with our headquarters folks who's up in Washington, D.C., itself. But what we're actually going to do here today is we're going to talk about sexual assault. It's a very hot topic. It's one that from a military standpoint, the military for years have been trying to get a handle, on it. It actually transcends into society, as well. Just to give you a kind of a little background historical perspective on what the military is doing and why we're here with this topic is, it really goes back to 2004. That in 2004 there actually was an anonymous report to, at that time, the Secretary of the Air Force, and it came from a cadet from the Air Force Academy, who, and the allegation was that there was a rape, that she was raped, but nobody did anything about it. Basically, it was swept under the rug. So they sent it through the system the way the channels are supposed to work. And what happened was that after the investigation, they found out that there was like 54 other allegations of sexual assault. Out of that one investigation that Office of Special Investigations, the OSI, investigators in the Air Force actually uncovered. So that sent the whole military branch of service scrambling because at the time, Defense Secretary Rumsfeld issued a review of the academies, including the Coast Guard Academy, and then they changed it and said, no, the Pentagon said we need to review everything. So we need to review all the military branches of service about sexual assault. Find out what your policies are, what you're doing about it, how you're responding, how you're reporting this, services, resources, everything that comes into being. So they put a task force together to come up with recommendations on what to do. And that joint task force back in 2004 basically instituted a lot of different changes. And since 2005 and on, up until now in 2016, changes keep coming with the program in regards to sexual assault. So we're going to be talking about that. But one of the things that we want to do, and when you do the training, you want to make sure that, because the actual training itself is really designed for a group, it's designed to spur conversation and to talk about sexual assault, to get the conversation going, not to end the conversation at a training event like this, but to keep the conversation going. So it becomes really, really important. One of the things we'll talk about, and you'll watch throughout the video here in a few minutes, is that there's a continuum of sexual assault. In other words, the continuum says that things can start out in a harassment level and eventually escalate into an assault type of charge. So you'll see that on here. We'll talk about that as we go through the video here during the discussion portion this afternoon. One of the things with the movie and the film that you're going to see is that the characters are all fictitious. They are actors, with the exception of, you're going to see a legal person who's actually a real Navy lawyer that they put into the film itself. But it isn't a real film. It is actors, but it portrays a situation that is very common, especially into the military setting. And we'll talk about that, about the stage of what happens as we go through in the discussion phase, but it's very, very realistic on the type of scenario and the type of a case that the military right now is really seeing within the branches of service. So as you watch the film here today, make sure you look and pay attention to the behaviors that's occurring from all the different parties that you see. So I think to kick off today, I think what I'd like to do is just start the videotape. We'll see a little short introduction about leadership, and then it'll go into the film, and then at the first pause, at the first break, we'll have some questions to discuss it. Okay? There we go.
Speak about a subject I'm very passionate about.
Can you hear it enough? Is that loud enough? Or?
It's a problem in my name, and it needs to stop. The problem is sexual assault. Sexual assaults happen every day, on all days, and it affects everyone, men and women. This is almost very difficult to comprehend, but on any given day, as many as 3 individuals in our Navy and Marine Corps are sexually assaulted. And that number is probably low. Many assaults go unreported. The majority of assaults crimes against other shipmates. And that goes against everything we stand for as sailors. Sexual assault is a crime, and it causes terrible personal pain. It lowers team morale, and it undermines the very unit cohesion for which we all strive. It's very real, it's destructive, and I will tell you, it has no place in our Navy. A sexual assault is an attack on a fellow sailor. Now think about that. It's an attack against those that we go to sea with and fight together with. Its effects are far-reaching. It also affects the readiness of our entire Navy. As sailors, we need to look out for our shipmates, at sea, on shore, on duty, and on liberty. All the time. We need to get to the left of this and prevent sexual assaults. Each of you needs to be our first line of defense. As we watch this video, we need to ask ourselves, do we treat everyone with the respect and professionalism we expect to get? Do we have the courage to intervene if we see a shipmate heading down a dangerous path?
No, it'll roll right into it.
I guess it started when I first met him, right when I came on board. It was my first ship. I was really excited, but trying not to be too obvious about it. Petty Officer Walsh, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Conway seems sweet. Beck, competent, very sure of himself. And Pope sort of reminded me of my middle brother Taylor, just a real piece of work.
I'd like to get me some of that Texas DT.
Hey, come on, man. You wouldn't know what to do with the girl she fell in your lap.
Oh, and you do?
You're damn right. I make a real sailor out of it.
Like you'd even have a shot at a woman like that. I mean, she's cute, not just boat cute.
$100 says I do.
Easy money.
I was just messing with Pope about $100. Now let's go up into this huge deal.
That wasn't even my idea. Besides, better know that Beck pretty much gets whatever he wants.
You go on Liberty with Beck, something's gonna go down. The time before it was Key West. Yeah, Key West. I'm telling you, man, it was a 6-foot boat.
No way.
Yeah, the guy welded it out of scrap metal, and Beck and I go back about a year and a half. It made it all the way to Miami. Boat came aboard just before Key West. Beck was always smooth, very smooth. Pope, not so much. Sometimes we had to keep an eye on Pope, kinda protect him from himself. Anyway, Beck was a chick magnet. Wow. I'm talking about him in the past tense. It's weird, but I don't talk to him anymore. I'm not even sure where he is these days.
It was great being underway.
Watch out for some of the dudes around here. I got your back, but when I'm not
I
around...
grew up with 3 brothers. Trust me, I have never had a hard time putting a guy in his place before. I've got your back. Yeah, right.
When I was around her, she seemed friendly, but reserved, you know? Like, she wanted her space, and that's fine. She had a boyfriend. Serious, I think. But, Beck zeroed in on her anyway.
That's him. He's adorable. I know, right? He wants to be a golf pro, but he's not very good. How long have you guys been together? A couple years.
You guys are so lucky.
I know.
Well, I gotta go on lunch, so I'll see you later.
Who's that?
My fiance. Well, boyfriend, technically.
Let me see. Come on. Hey, come on, man. Give it back. Okay. Almost engaged. Give me a break. He was just some picture on her phone.
Sure, Beck was my LPO, and he was giving me a lot of his time, but I don't know, he started to get kind of in my space.
Beck may have been trying to help her fit in, but something was off.
I really didn't like being touched like that. I probably should have told him to take his hand off me, or removed it myself. Something. I don't know, Chief seemed to notice, but he didn't say anything. Maybe I was just being too sensitive.
I hate that sensitive crap. She's the one that wanted to work with a bunch of dudes.
After a while, it kind of started to creep me out. I kind of tried to talk to Caldwell about it, but I didn't want her to think that I couldn't cut it. Besides, Beck was such a great LPO. How could I complain about him?
Amazing timing.
I know, right?
Terry,
What?
what's wrong with you?
Do panties scare you, Conway?
Get the hell off. Seriously, grow up. That whole thing really just set me off. Beck was getting to be a real dick. I wanted to talk to her, warn her maybe. Wash, what up? But she seemed embarrassed. And me? I was holding her freaking underwear. Guess I was kind of shy around her. Man underway is great, but you never get a break, you know?
Yeah. I will not mind setting foot on dry land, at least for a day or 2.
So is everything okay?
Yeah, fine.
How's the mentoring going?
It's okay. Helpful, but kind of intense, you know?
Okay.
It's all good.
I guess I could have just asked her outright, is Beck bothering you or not? Or, she could have told me that he was making her feel uncomfortable, but she didn't. So, I figured either she was not bothered by it, or she was taking care of it herself, and there was no reason for me to get in the middle of it.
Maybe I should have come right out and said something, but Conway's a first class like Beck. They're buddies. Got each other's backs and all. Besides, we all work together. I didn't want things to get weird. But it got to the point where people had to notice.
I guess I just figured things were okay between Beck and Walsh.
And it's gonna be
That is until I heard Beck and Pope talking about this big party they were planning.
Nice. Sucks you're gonna have to work for it, though. Walsh is coming to the party, so, you know, whatever. You're just mad. I'm gonna win the bet. I can take your money now, or we can pay up first thing Sunday morning.
We never shook on it, man.
Maybe not first thing, if you know what I mean.
Really, Beck?
What?
Is this gonna be Key West all over again?
Chill out, man. Nothing happened that night. And hey, man, I'm surprised you even remember.
May not remember it all, but I remember enough.
Ladies, Lauren and I are gonna get some air.
Your friend, is she okay?
She's fine.
I don't know. She looks kind of wasted. Okay, I'd had a few. I was relaxed. I was having a good time. I thought about sending Pope to check on Beck. Or checking on it myself. I don't know. Another part of me didn't want to get in Beck's business. Still, that girl seemed awful young. And really drunk.
So what? She said she was 18. She wanted to party.
Yeah. Young, old, Beck got all the girls. All of them.
Besides, nothing happened, and Conway knows it. Hey, maybe he was just jealous.
So this is the first pause, in the break to talk about the first segment. So one of the things that we often talk first is just basic statistics that we have. When you translate statistics, obviously from a military standpoint, from a Coast Guard, we talk civilian statistics as well, because the Department of Justice actually has statistics that show that for a sexual assault, that 1 in every 3 or 4 women will be sexually assaulted at some point in their life. And for males, it's 1 in 6 and 7. So the numbers obviously vary a little bit. When you look at the Coast Guard statistics that we talk about, the numbers have really gone up recently. When I say recently, really for the last 10 years. We've seen a dramatic rise in the numbers of sexual assaults within the Coast Guard. We believe it's because of awareness, education, training. We put things in place that you don't have, but from a NOAA perspective, but we do it from a military perspective with the restricted report, which is a confidential type of report. And the difference between our reporting procedure is in a confidential report, that just means it's called restricted, but it's confidential, that only certain people can actually take that report. One of our victim advocates can, our SARCs can, and our medical folks can as well. If someone tells them they reported a sexual assault to them, they can keep it confidential, restricted, and the command does not know, and neither does any legal or CJIS investigators know as well. So it is limited on who actually knows the sexual assault. But the person can still remain to get the help that they need with everything else, from counseling, medical, any other type of referral services that they need. They can still get. An unrestricted report is just like you would do like in the civilian world, where you actually report it, and then the investigators come in, legal will come in if there's enough evidence for the crime that has occurred to prosecute. But you can still get all the help, the medical, counseling, all those things that come into play. So we actually have 2 different ways to report. Once we gave options for people to report, we saw the numbers start to rise up on the report. So it kind of correlates with that as well. But big part of this, and the first part is seen by watching that. What was your initial reactions watching that first part of that film?
So I think, I don't know, the players in it are typecast, of course, but there's the good guy, there's the weird guy, then there's the kind of the suave ladies man or whatever, and it's applicable to some of our ships. So we have there's always junior officers, there's junior personnel coming aboard the ships all the time. They're mentored by senior people on the ships, and it's really incumbent upon the leadership on the ships to take whoever under their wing and not be creepy and weird like that. That there are several dynamics there that were definitely weird, touching and things, kind of cornering the female in those situations, which isn't right. And it was almost like the LPO was taking advantage of his status as the supervisor. Here, come over here, do this, and then, kind of things of that nature, and certainly applicable in our cases.
Okay, so there is quite a bit of behavior, like inappropriate type of behavior that's going on. One of the things with that behavior that we look at, sometimes it's difficult because for a lot of folks that appears to be typical type of behavior that occurs, even though it is, inappropriate. And you said, like you said, you mentioned 2 or 3 different things that Beck, who's actually Beck is actually the one who's exhibiting that type of behavior, is really starting to kind of cross the line a little bit. Talk a little bit about the continuum of harm, as what we talk about with sexual assault, is that oftentimes what we see is that before sexual assault actually happens, we don't have a sexual assault yet, obviously in the film, but before that happens, there's a lot of times there's low-level behaviors that occur prior to something happening. That's kind of where it starts. A lot of times it starts out with when we talk about low-level behaviors, we're talking about sometimes crude jokes, sexual innuendos, maybe even vulgar jokes, or maybe to a point of even like where it becomes like, you hear this in the civil rights world a lot with sexual harassment, where there's even like pictures on the wall, or things basically at a lower level that's really occurring, and then unchecked, it starts to progress a little bit more. Because what happens for a lot of folks is they start to test the boundaries and how far they can go. That's why when you saw that, even in that film part, did you see anything in there that you would constitute maybe potentially sexual harassment? Or maybe close to being
I
that?
would think any physical touching, I mean, it's no one's right to touch anybody else. I mean, even in sports environments, or even, casually like Beck was doing, it's kind of hands off. Obviously that's not always the case, but in my opinion, especially in a work environment or even outside of work, no one, unless it's welcomed and so on, it's no one's right to touch somebody else, and especially like that, kind of cornering her to some degree in tight spaces and things of that nature. That I would imagine she was probably threatened in those environments, and that's not right at all.
And it is, and if you watch that, you could pick up some things that where she was very uncomfortable, at the very least. The one time when he did put the arm, around her, you could see her kind of just like, "What are you doing?" In sexual harassment world, they will tell you that the first thing you do is tell someone to stop. Don't touch me, don't get that close, to me. You try to put that boundary, between the two. When you start to see the continuum, though, of harm, when things don't, or you're not told to stop, or nobody addresses it, things can continue to progress down the road, where it starts to get a little bit more, as you mentioned, creepy, but it starts to get a little bit more bold too, with that. So there definitely were some examples, in there that definitely got close to the sexual harassment, probably constituted sexual harassment, and at the very least, I said for Walsh, who was the female, she was very uncomfortable, in those situations as well. One of the scenes in there you saw, and Conway is his buddy. When you saw Conway in there, what were your thoughts about him? Did you feel anything for him, what he maybe was thinking, or what do you think his thoughts were going on?
So he seemed to have he seemed to be like a better person, but like more, looking out for Walsh. He could have, I know in several of the situations, he could have stepped up more a little bit to try, but he said he didn't want to get in the business of others and things, which is always an impediment that for bystanders to have to, they may not want to get into others' business, but he seemed to, have a good moral compass, like, hey, he's acting improperly here, and maybe I should try to do something, but I don't want to intervene, and so he seemed to know what was right.
Yeah, he definitely exhibited that. He exhibited signs to actually bother him with some of the things that was going on. You could see him at one point look at him like, without saying anything, like, that's not right what you're doing here. But he didn't intervene in that situation, and that's something that we'll talk about here as we go through the rest of the film when you see some of the other segments. But that was certainly something that he did from a society standpoint. That happens a lot, as well. That people see things, they recognize things, but they don't get involved, in that situation. Part of it could be that was his best friend, one of his best friends, on the boat and getting into his business. Obviously, they've had conversations before, about this, because they talked that even at Key West, obviously something happened, at Key West that bothered him, because he brought it up, during the segment himself. So that's good to watch for the inappropriate behaviors, but also the behaviors that are there that people see, but don't maybe react, to that as well. When we talk about professionalism, though, and that's one of the things that we talk about, even on the ship, on professionalism. What do you think? What if I had to ask you, like, define professionalism? What do you think professionalism looks like, or should look like?
So I think carrying out your job and properly, and creating an environment where others feel comfortable to carry out their jobs appropriately and properly.
Mm-hmm.
So so on our ships, the buzzword is mission first, people always. So
Mm-hmm.
that's so creating a safe environment, both physically and emotionally. I mean, physically being underway is inherently dangerous, or operating one of our aircraft is inherently dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
So looking out for that safety aspect, but also making people feel, emotionally and physically, personally safe, that, you're not creating kind of a hostile work environment, threatening, with threatening behaviors and things of that nature.
Mm-hmm.
To successfully complete the mission, our mission's data collection. So, at the end of the day, however many nautical miles of coastline surveyed, or, however many stations completed, and, doing that obviously safely. And, there's the different aspects of safety there.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So, looking at that segment, would you say that that was a professional type environment on the boat?
I would say just with the interactions that were allowed to happen, probably, so there seemed to be a lot of teaching going on, which was really great, but there was also the interactions with the physical touching, and you could see several other of the ship leadership were walking by and kind of gave a cockeyed look at the, hey, what's going on here? There's kind of, close contact and things of that nature. So I would say that was limited professionalism. There shouldn't be, there should be the teaching and the counseling and the mentoring, but at a physical separation, and like that was too close.
Sure.
In my opinion.
Sure. So definitely, there's definitely some things, and maybe that was a small clip to say overall what the climate would be, but definitely there were some things going on, and you definitely picked up that there was some of the, at least the mid-level and up leadership, that saw some things, still didn't address it, but they saw some things. Walsh who's the female, she's the female, in this. Why do you think that she didn't speak up herself? Obviously some things started to bother her, even with her female friend. She had a female friend that and even in the clip itself it said, I wanted to tell her. But what do you think was maybe driving someone that wouldn't want to say something?
I think part of it could be fearing for her career, because this is, after all, her LPO, her supervisor, to some degree, a senior enlisted person to her, who's helping her through the ranks and helping her to understand ship life. And if she speaks out, his reaction may be, all right, I'm not going to help you anymore. He could go one of two routes. He could say, oh, I didn't mean it like that. Or he could just, turn a cold shoulder to her and, all right, I'm not helping you anymore if you're gonna, so she could probably fear for her career. She might fear if she's alone with him, he could react aggressively towards that statement and somehow escalate things. And, I'm sure she probably didn't want to rock the proverbial ship. Like, oh, I don't want to be the one speaking out. Maybe this is just how it is.
That's
and
right.
Historically, we've changed a lot of things in the military and in NOCOR and society in general. And, the way it always has been is not the correct way it should be. We're progressing as a society and as a species.
Right.
And, just because that's how it was on ships before doesn't mean that's how it should be now and how it will be in the future. And so what was right in the 1980s isn't right now. So, but that could be in the back of her head, hey, maybe that's just how ships are. I've got to get used to it.
Right. Well, absolutely. And you think about that too, and those are all correct as far as what you said, and those are all valid reasons why someone wouldn't. Plus, as a female on board a boat, it doesn't give statistics or anything on the boat, but we do know, even from a military perspective, that it's a male-dominated profession. And so sometimes people are afraid, especially from a female perspective, about labeling. If they do report or go tell somebody, tell the chief, tell somebody else up above, tell even the skipper or the CO, the XO, something is going on that's bothering her. What do you think that may do to everybody else below her, even from Beck, who's the gentleman that she's talking about? Rumors could start. So a lot of times people feel, like you said, they don't want that involved coming down on themselves. So they do make the determination not to say anything, not to report. They kind of keep it in, even though there's things going on that's bothering her from that. So that's good. And those are all good discussion points, for that. The next segment that we're going to watch, though, we're going to watch now that they're going to go on Liberty. So they're going to come off the boat, and they're going to go to the Liberty scene that was kind of set up a little bit before at the beginning of the film to show what it's going to be. But they're at Liberty having a good time. So as you watch the Liberty scene, kind of watch for behaviors, for both positive and negative, things that maybe people are doing right, but also look for some opportunities for people. Maybe, you mentioned the word bystander before, but maybe could step in and maybe do something or say something, prior. So if we could, we'll go ahead and watch this, and then we'll talk a little bit about it afterwards.
Yeah, well, that was then. As far as I could tell, Walsh had no interest in Beck. And since Beck wasn't getting the message, I decided I had to say something. Chief, ma'am, may I speak with you for a moment?
Of course, Conway. Everything okay?
Yes, ma'am. Well, no, not really. I'm a little concerned about some things I've seen between Beck and Walsh.
Are they in a sexual relationship?
No, not that. I think Beck has a sight set on Walsh, and it's hard to explain, but I just don't like what I'm seeing.
There have been a few times when I thought that Beck was being a little too friendly with Walsh, but she never said anything about it to me, and I've seen her stand up for herself more than once with you guys. I'll talk to Beck about it.
Thanks, Chief. I was paranoid that Beck would think I ratted him out to the chain. Maybe I did, but I wasn't trying to get him in trouble. I was just trying to get the message through to him more than anything.
Beck, Chief, word on the ship is that you're being a little too friendly with Walsh. I'm her mentor, Chief. It's my job to... I've seen you mentor her, Beck. I don't see you mentoring any of the guys around here like that. Getting all up close and personal.
What did you tell Chief? Look, man, I had to say something. Like hell. Put you in my bag, man. I don't need them in my ship. Well, then lay off Walsh. And all that crap about Liberty.
Yeah, well, when I need a confront, I'll call you.
Who goes complaining like that? Does Conway even know how hard I worked in that shop? Or even give a shit?
If he was pissed, he was pissed. Look, if he were my friend, he would have listened to me. Or never put me in that position in the first place.
I just wanted to check in and see how you're doing.
It's definitely been an experience. I'm learning a lot. I really appreciated Ensign Wyatt talking to me.
You do have a great teacher. Becky's our CWIS ace.
Part of me wondered, was there something she wasn't telling me? Like, she knew about Beck? And if she did, how come she said Beck was so great?
Yeah, it's a tough environment. Guns and guys all day long. But I think it's going to make you a strong sailor.
Everything is okay, though, really.
If you need anything, my door is always open.
Yes, ma'am. Anyway, by that time, I figured what I needed was a break. Liberty sounded pretty good.
Liberty was coming up. I figured I'd done as much as I could to make sure Beck got the message. Beck and I usually shared a room on Liberty. But this time I found out he had different plans.
Dude, chill. Hope you're gonna find your bunkmate. I already booked the king size, three's a crowd.
So what are you saying?
Don't be so uptight, man. Liberty's gonna do you some good.
And I guess it did.
Come on, man.
For a while, anyway. Everybody was having a good time.
definitely not that much. But I was having a good time for once, and I just kind of lost track. I'd been so focused underway. I just didn't want everyone to think I was uptight.
Hey, she was letting me know she was game. I mean, she drank everything I gave her.
Looking back, I just can't believe it. How could I be so stupid? It's just, there were so many of us there. What could go wrong?
I know I should have said something. She was barely 20. But I just didn't want to make that my problem. Besides, Beck seemed to be keeping himself in check. I figured Walsh knew what she was doing, so I relaxed. I don't know what to say, other than at some point, I noticed they were both gone.
Oh, so what? Yeah, Beck scores again. I mean, she would have gone with him if she didn't want to.
I need to call my boyfriend.
Yeah, we will. Yeah. We'll call him. We're almost to the room.
Can't find my phone.
It's okay. We'll find it. We'll find it. We'll just take you to the room.
This is not my room.
Okay. So let's start with this segment for the Liberty section, but we'll start a little bit with leadership. What stood out with you from the leadership perspective?
So, I think the biggest thing was that it was, so it's different rates in the same environment. So there's senior enlisted with junior enlisted.
Mm-hmm.
We have similar situations on our ship. We don't have enlisted in the No Corps, but there's senior and junior officers, senior and junior crew. I felt like at one point when she they were playing that game and she drank whatever was in her cup, and he added like his drink to her cup, and that's like.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, that's kind of a ploy there that's not really something, and it's still even though they're outside of work, it's still the mentor subordinate relationship, or senior enlisted and junior enlisted thing. So that I mean, just because they're out of uniform and off the ship, that doesn't go away.
Mm-hmm.
It's still, and you got to look out for your shipmates, and he's obviously got another agenda that he wants to get her drunker for his own reasons. So that he's failed in his leadership. I mean, obviously, people's judgments get a little bit clouded when alcohol gets involved, but he's kind of failing as a leader and taking advantage of his subordinate to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. That's kind of my take on it. And Conway again, he was in the voiceover, he was thinking of interviewing or intervening. But he was like, oh, I figured I've kind of said my piece and done what I can do, and he probably could have looked out for his his shipmate a little bit better there, and I don't know, tried to keep them apart, or at least keep a better eye on them. And then if they both leave together, well, maybe I gotta go
Find out where they're at, maybe
see
kind
where
of.
they're going, and make sure she gets home okay, and gets where she's going okay.
What about because Conway at the beginning of the segment did kind of, we talked the last segment that we knew he had seen some things that he didn't like, but really didn't address it. He did go to his officer on the ship, his junior officer on the ship, and the chief. Anything about that conversation, and subsequently, I guess, the chief intervening, anything that either struck you good or struck you as could have done better, or anything stand out in that?
Yeah, I feel like when the chief talked to him about it, the chief said, "Oh, I noticed a couple times previously that you were too close or whatever," and it's like that's the chief's job, is to notice that and then intervene and not have a junior enlisted bring it to him. I
Absolutely.
mean, that's what chiefs and officers should do. You know, you're kind of, kind of looking out for those below you, and the same with the ensign. The ensign kind of spoke in vague terms to Walsh and like, oh yeah, he's the Sea Whiz master and he's really good and everything. And I just
Correct.
want to make sure everything's okay. And she knew that there had been, Conway had brought to them that there was something
That's right.
there, and maybe she should have been more blunt.
That's right.
And I mean, you don't want to get in people's business, but by the same token, you want to take care of your people and make sure, hey,
Sure.
is he making you uncomfortable? Like,
That's right.
what's really going on here? And being a female ensign, she could have maybe gotten, maybe some of the barriers could have been brought down. Whereas, if it were a male ensign who was asking about it, then maybe, Walsh would have been a little bit more, I don't know, less inclined to talk. But
Sure.
if it's female ensigns, like, hey, come in my room. I mean, they're in the passageway.
Correct.
So come in. I don't know. Let's talk in a in whatever enclosed space, so there's not other ears listening and things like that. Let's go talk about this. And
So what do you and that's a good point for that. And when she said that, when she mentioned, like, this is, he's our top person, he's our top trainer, mentor kind of thing. What do you think that Walsh was thinking, or maybe possibly could be thinking at that time? What do you think could run through somebody's mind if you're having a conversation and that kind of verbiage was being used about him?
The ensign's a big fan, and like, he's a star player.
Absolutely.
And if she says, well, he's kind of inappropriate, then maybe then the ensign now looks at her as like, oh, well, she's going to be a troublemaker. Maybe
Absolutely.
boots it up the chain, and then CO or XO and CO become involved and kind
That's
of
right.
senior players, and so that's just kind of the the officer enlisted dynamic could come into play there. And
Absolutely. And she pretty much let him know he's our rising star. He's the one that we go to for this kind of, like, the mentorship. So it could shut her down the other direction to think, who's going to believe me if I say something against this guy who they obviously like so well. The chief who went and did the counseling session, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think he broached the subject pretty well. He did. I think there was, because he was the one who walked by previously when there was that the physical contact
Yes.
going on, and kind of cocked his eyebrow a little bit. And
Yes.
maybe he needed more. Maybe he'd only seen one or two instances, but he probably should have brought it up himself instead of having a first class petty officer bring it to him and say, hey,
Correct.
Chief, there's a problem, and he kind of already knew that there was a problem, and it's
Uh-huh.
I don't know, if you've been on ships that much and have that much experience, you kind of know when there's an issue, and he should have probably brought it up through his chain of command and kind of investigated a little bit further.
And then think about the setting he was in when he was talking to him. If put in your situation, if you said, I'm going to go talk to this guy, counsel this guy, would that have been the type of setting that you would want that to happen in?
Because they looked like they were in some sort of fire control station, and so obviously with the petty officer who's concentrating on some electronic something or other, trying to do a job that's
Correct.
presumably for national defense, then it's not a good time to have to think about other stuff. I mean, he's got to do his job on the ship, and then maybe when he gets off watch, hey, let's go talk, wherever. He couldn't go to the chief's mess because he's first class, but someplace where, a room that's, again, probably not got other ears in it. There are other people at other stations, presumably, who are
Absolutely.
who are probably listening to the chief, and then they know there's an issue, and that's not right. I mean, it's not right even. I mean, for the victim or the presumed victim or the presumed perpetrator. I mean, their business should all be kept kind of confidential on the ship.
Absolutely.
I mean, you don't want to add don't want shipmates to know other shipmates' business just because.
That's right.
I mean, obviously the chain of command has to be informed, but their peers don't need to know about it.
That's right.
So that was a pretty bad venue for a kind of intervention.
Yeah, and you think about that too, from where they were at, as far as even from the chief leaning over kind of his shoulder doing that. You think about a setting, and one of the things for like a discussion would be good to bring out that it should be more done a little bit more in private, like you said. So the emphasis really makes the point home because it's more you get that eye contact one-on-one, and the chief should be saying, I want this knocked off now, and I don't want to hear another word about this. But instead of you kind of get the feeling a little bit that it was just not a big deal, not necessarily to the chief, but to Beck, because he was here sitting there doing his other stuff and not really necessarily paying full attention to it. So think about the setting that some of this is in, as well. And it's good when you do for a group discussion to be able to talk about those settings as well. Next thing, think a little bit about bystander intervention. What do you know about what is your definition, or what do you feel is bystander intervention?
So, and I've done some reading on the topic in the sexual assault prevention world and things, but bystander is a witness to, anything on that continuum of harm. So whether it's assault, harassment, anyone who's, who sees that and then, kind of does an internal moral compass
Sure.
check. Is this proper behavior? Is this improper behavior? And then, the bystander training is supposed to facilitate a response instead of. And I've read some of the statistics, like if there's a group of people, everybody's much less likely to intervene because everybody's like, oh, so someone else will do it. And then there's also, if people aren't jumping in to assist, people have the inclination that, oh, I'm wrong, I must be reading this wrong,
Right.
everybody else is doing nothing, so I'm probably just thinking about it wrong.
Right.
But it's to, interject and, kind of stop the bad behavior where
Sure.
it is, and then, kind of de-escalate the situation instead of letting it escalate and get to, the assault level of the spectrum.
Sure.
And however you can do that, whether it's distraction, whether it's, any number of things.
Absolutely, and that is, and you describe, perfectly the bystander effect, which basically that's exactly what the bystander effect is. The more people involved in something or see something, the less likely someone will do it. But why do you think that is so? Why do you think people would be reluctant to jump in or say something or do something when you have a crowd around you? Or when, you said one of them already, that maybe if nobody else is doing anything, maybe that's the right thing. Maybe that is the right answer. And I don't want to go on that limb by myself. But what would be some other reasons you think people wouldn't do it?
Well, I think, if they do feel like they, if they feel that they're wrong, then, if they try to intervene or do something, then there would be, repercussions from the rest of the people. Oh, why did you do that? That was wrong. And, it all comes back to that internal moral compass check. that gut check that we can all do. We all know when something's wrong. You feel it internally, and things don't add up. This isn't right.
Sure.
And then, having that inner strength to intervene and when again nobody else is doing anything.
Sure.
When it's right to do it.
Absolutely, and that all plays a part in that, in the bystander intervention. And we certainly, from a military, perspective, we do teach bystander intervention. We want people. We actually in the Coast Guard have what we call Shipmate 19, which came from the commandant, who basically said that it's your duty. They charge every person in the Coast Guard with a duty to do something, get involved. If you see something, just like to see something, say something. The same thing in Shipmate 19 is that there are no bystanders in the Coast Guard. So he charged every single member, no matter what rank, the lowest rank to the highest rank, that basically to be involved. And if something that doesn't seem right or seems wrong, or that you have an opportunity to do something, you can. We still have an issue with that sometimes, where people, because don't want to do it for a variety of reasons, like you said, either they feel that they don't want to go out there on that limb by themselves, or a lot of times people just feel, well, there's 50 people around, I'll wait for somebody else to do it, because I know even if I don't do it, if I walk away, somebody else will intervene. Well, if everybody feels that way, then nobody will ever do anything as well. So bystander intervention becomes very, very important. You mentioned one, to kind of a technique to do, but there's actually kind of 4 different techniques that we talk about. One is direct intervention. What do you think direct intervention would be?
That would probably be physically getting in between the two people and either trying to engage presumably the perpetrator in a conversation while the potential victim could then leave or go somewhere else, or go back to her friends or
Sure.
his friends in whatever case it was, and try to distract the potential perpetrator, hey, let's go over here, let's go watch the game, let's go to another bar, let's go and almost physically remove them from the situation.
Okay. Yeah, direct is definitely just that, getting directly involved in a situation. What we tell in the Coast Guard, what we teach, is to do it safely. That one of the things that we don't want people getting themselves into a situation that they put themselves in danger or other people in danger as well. So certainly getting involved in a situation directly is important. Oftentimes people don't want to do that though. Sometimes people, and for a variety of reasons, sometimes it's just like from a military perspective, a rank thing. If it's somebody that's say military and a little bit higher ranked than they are, they feel uncomfortable about doing that. So direct is really just that, getting involved and maybe stepping in and stopping whatever they see is going on. So what do you think an indirect approach would be? Indirectly.
Indirect could be. Yeah, kind of. I don't know. Maybe like. I don't know. I'm coming up blank here, but like some. I don't know. Maybe that would be more of the distraction thing instead of like getting right in between people, and I don't know, like seeing if you could just peel off the perpetrator into something else somehow.
But distraction is that. I mean, distraction is one of the other techniques we use. Just like you said, distraction is a technique that happens. Just like you said, maybe having somebody else distract while you take the person away, or that you spill the drink on them, or you say, "Hey, come on, we got to go," or there's a phone call, or whatever the case may be. Kind of indirect approach. A little bit similarities. I mean, there's similarities. They kind of overlap into one another. But indirect way would be like whether you make something up or not, but indirect could be that, hey, pull somebody aside, say, hey, they're talking about you guys over there right now. They're talking about going to, in a military sense, I could say they're talking about going to the chief, or they're talking about going to the commanding officer about your behavior is kind of inappropriate, you're bringing a bad light on us. And so you kind of use somebody else as the third party that says, yeah, you better knock it off, and that way they kind of feel like, I'm not telling you to knock it off. I'm not doing that. But they're telling you over there, they're saying, I'm hearing that over there, so I'm protecting you from over here. So the person kind of feels, oh, well, maybe I'm bringing too much attention to myself doing this, because other people now are seeing me do this, and they're talking, and they're going to do something about it if you don't knock this off. And, I heard them. So that's kind of an indirect way to do it, without directly say, knock it off yourself. That way they don't feel like they're telling them to knock it off. They're telling somebody else is telling you to knock it off. I'm just kind of the liaison here to tell you this is what I hear over there. So that's kind of the indirect way as well. Distraction, as you said, was just that, like I said, distract the person to get them out of harm's way. Women do that a lot with, let's just all go to the bathroom, and like 5 of them get up and go to the bathroom, together to get the one person out, and then they're out there, they get them out of what they feel potentially is harm's way. And then the last kind of technique we talk about is protocol. What do you think of protocol? When we say protocol, what do you think? What comes to mind with that, do you think?
So I think like, chain of command and things on the ship, and like, I don't know, hey, we got to get back, Liberty's expiring, like, let's go, we got to get back to the ship, or, there's some policy that's got to be,
Absolutely.
We're only allowed out for another half an hour or something, or we got to get back to the ship in preparation for departure or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be exactly that. You're using the ship, you're using maybe, the CO, you're using somebody else, or you're going to tell somebody else, I'm going to go tell the chief what you're doing, or I'm going to go call the CO now, the base, or the ship, or whatever the case may be. It also could be like, even in a civilian kind of setting environment, it could be, I'm going to go tell the bartender, hey, there's something going on down there. I think you better, bartenders are charged, they're supposed to, if they're notified of something, they're kind of like a duty to themselves, like they got to take charge of that. Or they could say, hey, Mr. Bartender, Miss Bartender, call the police. This situation is getting out of control, right now, and there's something bad is going down. And you see that they're trying to take this girl out of here. Somebody needs to step in, from the, call the bouncers, call the police, call somebody. So you get some basic protocol, you tell somebody else above that can step in and do that, whether from a military sense, like you say, up your chain, or from even like just in the civilian kind of world, like at a bar, restaurant kind of thing. You get somebody else that works there, bartender, bouncer, maybe all the way to calling the police, if it's at that point. To do. So bystander intervention is really good. There actually is a show that we oftentimes talk about for bystander intervention is What Would You Do? I don't know if you've ever seen that on ABC News. There's a show, and they set things up, and there's actually a clip of that that talks about where they set up a bar scene like that just to see what other people will do in that type of situation where two actors, one female, one male, both, the female pretends to be drunk, and then the male actor tries to get her out, of the bar. So those are really good to talk about. Those are discussions that are talked about as far as what would you do, kind of situations to really kind of think about, what that is. So it's actually good. I mean, as far as that goes on, when we talk about this, you saw on the scene there, obviously the Liberty scene itself had a lot of alcohol. Alcohol is a contributing factor to sexual assault. I will tell you that right now. Even in the military sense, it's about 85% of all sexual assaults that happen are alcohol related. To be alcohol related doesn't mean people are necessarily drunk, but to be alcohol related just means that the victim, the perpetrator, or both, which oftentimes is the case, both have been drinking during the night of the incident, for that. So alcohol plays a key factor. One of the things that we always bring up from a discussion standpoint is, what does it mean with alcohol? What does it mean to be drunk? How do you know when someone's drunk? How could you tell? In that scene right there, could you tell that anybody in that scene, that Liberty scene, was intoxicated?
I would say not really. I mean, in the scene, when they were in the passageway in the hotel, Walsh was obviously unsteady on her feet.
Okay.
But when they were all sitting down, I mean, it just looked like they were having a good time, and obviously, no one was like visibly impaired enough. I mean, her perspective, she kind of, when it went to the first person, she like couldn't focus on her glass at one point. But other than that, I mean, they were all just kind of partying, and no one was visibly impaired and like totally incapable.
Because alcohol does play a key factor and a key role, within the sexual assaults themselves. And you're right, when you talk about, intoxication and being drunk and some of the signs like that, and the stumbling and maybe a little bit uneasy on her feet, maybe not being able to see the glass, and you had to kind of steady the other cup, underneath to put in. If you notice too that she was underage, if you pick that up, that she said she was drinking, underage. Which for a lot of folks, especially in the military, underage obviously, is a big situation, big issue, for that. But alcohol plays a contributing factor, because one of the things that alcohol does, obviously when we talk about alcohol clouds the judgment, decision-making skills are diminished, your perception changes. One of the things alcohol does is change your perception, a person. But even in this situation, even her perception, if you picked up on the perception of her going down the hall, when she got into the room, her perception of leaving the floor or leaving the party to go to the room, because she obviously had shown that she was intoxicated, when she got into the room, you notice, if you listen and you pick up, that she turned around and said, "This is not my room." So she picked up enough to know, because that tells you that he was going to take her back to her room, like to get her to safe, but obviously it was his room, and not hers. But we talk about alcohol a lot because one of the things that comes up as a key component of sexual assault is consent. What would you say right now if I were to ask you what consent was? What would be, just in your own words, consent to sexual activity?
So I would say a verbal, consent would be a verbal yes. I mean, the consentor has to be able to verbally say yes, and not being able to communicate if you're too drunk to, I mean, just because you're passed out doesn't mean you consent to anything.
Sure.
And so it would have to be yes.
Yeah, consent has to happen. Consent has to take place at the time. So someone can't say, well, we agreed 6 hours earlier that we were going to wind up in the evening and going to wind up in bed together. Consent has to take place when investigators look at it. Consent has to take place at the time of the act. But consent is just that, where it's open, freely agreement between the two parties that they know what's about to occur. Why alcohol is such a key factor in sexual assault is that because it does put that extra light on it to say, are they competent? Because one of the things with consent is it has to be a competent person. Now, definition of competent. What is competent? Competent actually plays a part for, you have to know what you're doing. You have to know what's about to happen, what's about to occur. Alcohol interferes with that. When we also talk about competent too, there's other factors that come into play. Every state in the Union has put and enacted laws within each state to some level, to some degree, because when we talk about like definition and legal intoxication, all that, those are really kind of legal terms that we're talking about. But every state has enacted laws which basically has said to some extent in their statutes that if you're impaired, if you're drunk, if you're intoxicated, whatever language that they're type of using, then you cannot consent to sexual activity. That's why when we talk even in the military sense, we get out and we teach this because it plays a part under the law. The consent is whatever, any investigation, when you start with an investigation, investigators, whether it's local civilian police or whether it's investigators from the military, what they're really trying to determine is whether consent occurred or not. Do they have consent? Usually they know in a situation, they know sex happened. They know that. Both parties usually agreed to that. Both parties said, yes, sex did happen. It's the consent, because usually what happens even in a rape case is one says, I did not consent. The other person says, yes, you did. I had consent. And then they have to try like a puzzle, piece it back together to what really occurred. That's why the alcohol is a contributing factor to it. It does not mean that drunk sex doesn't happen. You can still, people do that all the time. But the consent has to occur, which is why from a prevention side of the house, we talk about alcohol use, know your limits, adhere to your limits, don't get drunk, because basically then it just complicates the matter as far as from a sexual assault has occurred. So when we talk about this, we talk about consent. You have to have clear, open consent. No means obviously no from a consent factor. Being passed out on a bed means no. Not saying anything means no. Not being coherent means no. So there's a lot of factors that play, and even in that situation, you can probably kind of guess the direction of where it's going. When you have an intoxicated person, someone else who had been drinking themselves, but by their clear motives, you could tell that they weren't intoxicated. Because usually what happens in the military, people ask, well, what if you have two people who are drinking and are drunk? And I will tell you that it comes down to behavior, and it comes down to intent. And a lot of times, even if you watch that clip right there, you see a very intoxicated, appears to be intoxicated female stumbling down the hallway, not sure, doesn't know where her phone is, doesn't know where her key's at, put it in the wrong room. She thought she was going to bed. And then you see somebody else who clearly was able to do what? Open the door, get in the door, get things settled, move her down the hallway, even step out, look outside to see, is anybody looking? Did anybody see me come in here with her? Obviously he's got something on his mind, as well. So that is, consent becomes a very big topic to talk about, because that usually draws a lot of conversation about what is consent, what is not consent, what constitutes that, what does it mean from a legal, perspective. So it does draw a conversation, with that as well. But key, because it is very, very key, for that as well. So the bystander effect plays a big part. Consent certainly plays a big part, within that as well. One of the things too, real quick, on that segment, because we saw a male that looks like is potentially getting ready, maybe potentially to sexually assaulting a female. A lot of times people think that males don't get sexually assaulted, and I will tell you that is not true. That males are victims of sexual assault. We're seeing that a lot, even in the military, setting. For a lot of times, people, and I've done a lot of trainings over the years about this, and I've had males come up and tell me they will never be a victim of sexual assault. No other male will ever sexually assault them. And usually it goes back to the alcohol question that I turn it back to them. And oftentimes I will ask them, I'll say, well, do you drink? And the answer is yes. I say, sometimes you drink more than what maybe you intended, and if the answer is yes, sometimes you get drunk, and if the answer is yes, right there's a possibility that you could be a victim of sexual assault. Because just like a female can be taken advantage of when they're intoxicated, so can a male, as well. And a lot of times that's what we see, as well. So when we talk about that, even especially from a statistics standpoint, male on female is the number one sexual assault related offense when a male perpetrates a female or sexually assaults a female. Male on male is the number two kind of case that we see like that. The third type of case that we see then is female on male. And then the fourth least likely to occur that we normally see is female on female. That's kind of the order that that we have. But the real key to a discussion and points is that yes, it does happen to males as well. Males are not immune, and it can really happen to anybody because a victim can be anybody. It doesn't have to be just a female. A lot of times people think it is just a female, but it does. Statistics show, again, we go back to 1 in 6 and 7 males in a lifetime will be a victim of sexual assault, as well. So that was that segment from the Liberty leading in. What we're going to go to now is watch the next segment. Because it's the next one is kind of the aftermath. When a sexual assault occurs, obviously it's a very traumatic event for whoever the victim is. We don't use the term survivor. A lot of times you hear the term survivor. In the military, we use victim still because they are a victim of a crime. Survivor, we allow the victim themselves at some point in the recovery process to make that determination for themselves. A lot of times we'll hear you got to call them survivors. We don't do that. We allow the victim at some point in that process to determine when they're a survivor. Especially when we talk about male on male or just male victims, a lot of times they do because they definitely feel that they are victims. And sometimes males are the opposite. They don't want to be known as a victim, as well. But we allow the person themselves to make that determination. So as we go through this next segment, watch how the impact on what it is, not just for the victim themselves, but everybody around them as well, because sexual assault impacts everybody, not just the victim. So if we could go ahead and watch this segment.
I barely remember getting back to the ship. The next day, I just wanted to stay on my rack. I didn't want to talk to anyone, tell anyone, not even Caldwell. I guess I felt ashamed more than anything. And then I went to medical. And everyone was really nice to me, but no one should have to go through an exam like that. I couldn't sleep. I wanted to crawl in a hole and disappear.
I wanted to talk to her, but I don't know. She kind of had a wall up.
I didn't do anything to deserve what happened. At first I felt guilty for drinking and letting my guard down, but it didn't take long for me to get really mad. What if he did this to someone else? Something had to be done. So I worked up the courage and I filed an unrestricted report, meaning they would find out about my drinking.
I kept thinking I let her down. Anyway, Beck got pulled off the ship and we got buried with work. Just slammed.
I tried, but I couldn't concentrate on work. After a while, it just seemed so hard being there. And I know some people blame me.
She's the one who seduced him. What his fault? Girls are always pulling that kind of crap. Lying and shit. It's just her word against his, right? Anyway, now Beck's gone. Conway's a rat. To tell you the truth, things just suck.
I needed to go somewhere else. I needed a fresh start. So I asked to be transferred.
When I asked Beck about what happened that night, what happened the other night, he shut me down. Anyhow, he wasn't around for very long after that.
They worked hard to be the OPO. They sent me away for a while. I was a rat.
Sexual assault.
still want to. Command's really supporting me, and this counseling it's still tough. Mostly, I don't see anybody, talk to anybody. All I do is work. Like I can just work myself out of this place I'm in. I'm not worse, not better. I'm just different. Definitely wiser.
I didn't do enough. None of us did enough. Lately, I keep thinking about Key West.
Ladies, Lauren and I are gonna get some air.
What are you doing? I did the right thing. That time.
So the last segment there, the aftermath, what range of emotions did you see in that from Beck?
So,
Or excuse me, from Walsh.
from Walsh. So she was, you know, I mean, I feel like she knew she asked for transfer, and I mean, she did things that showed me that she was confident, a little bit confident in herself. She knew she needed to get out of that situation, which I felt was good. And you know, she said she worked up the courage to file a report, which is, I know it's an internal thing that all victims have to kind of grapple
Sure.
with and actually finally come to terms with, that they have to let people know, which was really, so that's that inner courage that she had and found in herself. She was also, I'm sure, kind of just, forlorn that, like, hey, it came to this, like, this is why I joined the Navy. She said she still wanted to be in the Navy, which was great. And, she said her new command's really supportive, which, is really important. If if she went to another ship and it was the same way as her old ship, and she was, there was someone who was kind of, too close to her and, exhibiting those kind of strange, kind of harassing behaviors towards her, I'm sure she would have felt really bad and like, is this how it is everywhere? I don't want a part of this. And then maybe she would have just quit and said, I don't want I don't want this anymore for me. So
Yeah, that's a good point, because when you see the range, there is a range of emotions that people go through obviously afterwards. One of the things that's key is that there is no standard way for someone to react. Sometimes you will hear people say, with the sexual assault victim, they'll say, well, I didn't see her cry, or I didn't see her get hysteric, or him hysterical, or anything like that. But they do react in different ways. But usually they do. They go through a range of emotion. You start to see that. You start seeing some of the anger. Eventually, some of the anger came out. You saw some of the depression, the inner feelings, maybe some of the self-guilt. When alcohol is involved, as she mentioned about the drinking, there is some self-guilt with the drinking. Maybe I caused this. Maybe I created this. One of the things that we do teach when we talk about sexual assault or rape, that the victim is never to blame. That just because someone drinks too much, even gets drunk, that doesn't mean they deserve to be sexually assaulted or in this case even raped. One of the things I'll point out with the rape, that it's important from a forensic perspective, to go to the hospital to get the forensic. The real main purpose of a forensic evaluation from the forensic per se is to establish identity. In other words, to say this person did this to me, and to be able to identify that forensically, that yes, this is the person that you were talking about. But there's all kind of other things that go on in a forensic evaluation. They do look for, obviously, injuries, bruisings. They do a complete medical history. They start to treat for STDs, birth, pregnancy, things like that. Now, obviously, some of those are down the road as well. There has to be follow-up, for that. But they will start to look, even like a birth test. They'll look to see whether a female was pregnant at the time, and then they'll obviously do some follow-up testing, after that. So a lot of factors go into that. Very important. Within the first 72 hours, 72 to 96 hours is the most important time to get that. After that, they can still receive or still get that an evaluation, and they can actually still collect forensically. Over here at Portsmouth Naval Hospital, they actually tell me the lead forensic nurse over there actually has told me that they can actually collect forensic evidence up to 2 weeks. Maybe not a lot, it may be very little, but they still can actually collect. So even though someone doesn't go like the first 24 hours, 48 hours, it's still very important for them to go, if they are raped, to go forensically to get that evaluation done. It is a TRICARE benefit as well. So there is no cost associated. There's never a cost associated. Most states have set up, even here in the Commonwealth of Virginia, has set up a fund to be able to pay for that as well. So they don't want any reason for someone not going, to the hospital to get that. But you do see that. You do see that wide range of emotions as well. You mentioned from a work. What did you notice that? Because you did mention about the other individuals there as well. Their reaction as well. But what did you see in that from an impact to the other people that she works with?
So now they had to work harder since there were less people in their division or their department or whatever. So everyone was a little bit bitter about that.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. She was again. So she requested a transfer off the ship. So that's even more of a workload when she departs.
Mm-hmm.
So there are at least 2 people down.
Absolutely.
Which can, and then you'd hate to think that there would be, people would then turn that around and, focus their negative energy on her.
Mm-hmm.
Now since she's, her complaint, her report
Sure.
has caused the removal of the leading petty officer, now everybody has to work even harder.
Sure.
But
Do you think people do that? Do you think people will take that and start to blame?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, they do. They actually do, which is why it's important. So, even from a leadership perspective, what would you say needs to happen after, say, on a boat, you have a sexual assault, 2 people from the boat, same boat, have a sexual assault? What do you think the response should be? How do you think everybody else should handle that, from just the boat perspective, not necessarily just from leadership, but everybody, that coworkers, people that are on that boat?
I think, so there's obviously an incident on the vessel, so there's a command climate that's permissive to some degree, or the leadership has probably made a misstep somewhere along the line that they've let this behavior continue and develop. I would probably, and it's hard on ships, even large Navy ships, it's even harder on our ships. The crews are so small on our vessels that, if 2 people are removed, that can be, 10% of the crew.
Sure.
Right there. And so, but obviously, you don't want to get into anybody's personal business, but you should have some sort of all hands meeting, and that's part of what we're doing here. We're facilitating
Mm-hmm.
an all hands kind of
Sure.
safety stand down. It's like pausing. It's mostly for awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and because on some vessels this may not even enter into people's realm of thought, but it is an issue out there. And I'd kind of pause and say,
Mm-hmm.
hey, we've had an incident, and you can't go into too many of the details legally,
Right.
or for any number of reasons, can't identify the people. It's obvious who they are if they've been removed from
Sure.
the ship, but in general terms, you need to kind of cut that behavior off at the knees. This isn't permitted in this command, and perpetrators will be dealt with really severely. I mean, to the extent that they can. Obviously, reporting to local law enforcement and things is our, the stick, and the carrot is behave well and do right by your shipmates, and the stick is we'll call the cops.
Mm-hmm.
But we don't want to go down that road. You want to prevent it from the get-go, and I'd say kind of an operational pause, like, hey, we've had this incident, we can't have any more incidents, like
Mm-hmm.
something like that.
Yeah, and that becomes very important, like you say, early on in that type of environment, because one of the things, with that is that a lot of times people will start to take sides. They will start, because even if you look at that tape there that we just watched with Beck, he's more than likely going to go out and want to get his side of the story out, which is going to be opposite, obviously, because he thought, as he said on there, it was a bunch of crap that, you know, once I get this over with, I'll be back and I'll still be the chief. And then you showed them in the next scene, however, being court-martialed, you know, for this. But it's important to do that because people will generally start to take sides, and that could really affect the entire crew, because then you're talking about not only morale, extra work that has to be done, but just when you start to do that, you start to kind of polarize the entire crew, you know, as well. The thing that we talk about from a military perspective is that, you know, and it stands pat no matter, not just necessarily a military perspective, but there are only two people in that room that really knew what happened that night. So when you start to spread rumors and talk about what things happened, they really don't know. That's not the facts. You know, even if they're repeating something that they heard, that's not the facts. So what you said there from the skipper perspective is to get out there and say, no rumors, you know, almost like a gag order, like they'll talk about it, let the system play out, you know, let the investigation play out. If there's enough for legal will take over from there, and they'll do whatever is necessary, you know, in this situation. So it is important to get in front of that before things start to spiral out, where things do start to segregate, you know, out. Like you said, from Walsh's perspective, then she did need to transfer. She was able to move on to a new location. Counseling becomes very, very important. You know, within that, resources become very, very important from a counseling, you know, perspective. Obviously, from a military perspective, you have resources under the TRICARE. If you're in an area, say, some even say here, in this type of area, we have a lot of, we really have a plethora of military resources here. Portsmouth Naval Hospital, obviously, just across the water. So from a counseling perspective, medical too, but medical and counseling perspective, there's a lot here, you know, in this area. If you start to get more outward areas, then comes a little bit more of a challenge as well. Your employee assistance program, not sure if you're with Federal Occupational Health. Is that who does your employee assistance? Well, they have counselors, obviously, through their 1-800 number that people could call from a resource perspective. And that's the one thing from like a victim advocates, as they're victim advocates. And the one thing for a training like this as well, it's good to have, if you know we get to that point, to have victim advocates sit in the training as well. But it's good to have them because then they can help with the resources to direct and to guide on where to go, you know, for that help, you know, itself. But it is a dynamic type of situation that plays out. We see this type of situation in the military play out a lot. What we find to happen, to be perfectly honest, on a boat perspective, is that when we have land units, you know, stations in the sectors and our districts and all, it tends to be when we have an assault, it tends to be one victim and one accused, one perpetrator. When we get to our cutters and our larger cutters and they go out, it tends to be one perpetrator, but multiple victims, which tends to be you start to prey on more folks out. So that tends to be a kind of a typical type of pattern that we've seen, you know, over the years, at least from a Coast Guard, you know, perspective. But very important, you know, to look for, and the range of emotions that people have is very important. You know, to look for, because there is a range of emotions that people have, including from everybody else as well. What kind of emotions do you think that, say, even Beck or Conway, you saw Pope, what kind of emotions did they have?
So Beck had kind of, I mean, his standard emotion is, you know, kind of aggressive and like, I'll be back, you know, I'll make it work. I think when he was in his whites with his lawyer, you could see, even though he wasn't talking, you could see that it kind of hit him hard. He was probably, you know, he's getting ready for his court-martial, I guess, at that point. His lawyer was advising him of his rights. You could see kind of internally, he was like, wow, this is now a big deal. I think the Conway was, you know, he said like he should have done what he did in Key West, and he'd been thinking about that. And so he was guilty that he hadn't, you know, done right by his shipmate and, you know, intervened like he probably should have. Pope was just pretty bitter that they had to do more work and didn't really seem to care about any of the assaults. It affected him, so he was mad about it, and he was just kind of, seems to be kind of a jerk generally.
Yeah, and you see there's a wide range of emotions that they go through as well, that they see, including, you saw Conway with some self-guilt too. You know, I did the right thing that time. Because he recognized himself, I could have stopped this, or maybe I should have stopped this, I should have went farther. And if you really go back into it, you could look back into farther into that and see maybe the chief, did he do enough? Did the ensign do enough? Did they push it up to the skipper to maybe make it more? maybe they didn't, but they didn't obviously go into that to show. So there's some other dynamics that possibly could have happened, as well. But from an awareness perspective, it becomes very, very important, to look at how this can play out and how one thing can lead to another, and especially when you add things such as the alcohol, it plays a big part as well. So I think if we could, I think there's just one quick section left from the leadership before we wrap up. I believe there's just a small section left.
With your effort and focus, I know we can resolve this. Every single sailor watching needs to pay attention, and we all need to be mindful of the problem and get involved if needed. Together, we can beat this problem. It's up to every one of us. We need to take responsibility for ourselves and always consider the consequences of our actions. And we've got to step up when we see something is wrong. We've got to have the courage to get involved and intervene before something bad occurs.
If you're not sure about a situation, ask yourself whether it violates our core values and the professionalism for which you and I strive. If it doesn't look right to you, it probably isn't. And you need to have the courage to intervene. You must stand up and do the right thing. And that doesn't mean protecting your buddy if what they're doing or did is wrong. And if an assault occurs, we must, I repeat, we must help the victim. They're not just a number, they're a person.
If you've been the victim of a sexual assault, I want you to know that we're committed to your well-being. You have multiple avenues for reporting, and you have many resources at your fingertips for care, for counseling. We want you to get help. We want you to remain a vital part of our team. We will support you. In closing, shipmates, it's up to all of us to declare and commit that we will not tolerate sexual assaults in our Navy. In order to remain the world's premier maritime force, I need you to honor our Navy's core values, and I need you to watch out for your shipmates. By working together as leaders, as sailors, and as human beings, we're going to eliminate this crime from our Navy. It's up to us to turn the trend. Thank you for your service, and I'll see you out in the fleet.
And that's a good resource number right there, the Safe Helpline, to be able to call. That's a national helpline as well that people can call. It becomes important when we look at this, and I know just kind of close up a little bit, finish up here. We mentioned a little bit about watching the Invisible War. That is a very good film. We always throw a disclosure out there with it because it really wasn't a true documentary with that, because the director wanted to show one side, the negative side of sexual assault. Very good movie though, very good eye-opening. A lot of things that went on that was not good, that was not right. The one thing it didn't show in that movie is that the things that we put in place since then in the military to help victims, including like victim advocates, SARCs. Back then when all that was going on, they didn't have any types of folks like that to help, from a program, perspective, or very few, put it that way. So the program has changed over the years. So just a little disclaimer, with that, when you watch that, just try to keep in mind that there are now many more things in place to help victims out, which wasn't there, and they didn't show that. One of the things too, because all our program managers from the DoD as well as the Coast Guard got to meet with the director, get their input into the film, but none of their input went into the film. So they excluded it all because they were telling them about the positive things that we've done, and they wanted to show it from a negative side. But very good if you do show that film. It is a very good film to watch. It will generate a lot of discussion as well, and I think it's a good film from a training perspective to be able to show and talk about. The thing here with this is really, the design of this is really to spur a conversation about this and about sexual assault. It is happening. It is real. It is an issue. Things have changed not only from a military perspective, but in the civilian community as well. All you got to do is know what's going on in college campuses, to see the vast numbers of sexual assaults, that are occurring. It's not just females; it's males as well that are victims as well. They kind of don't come forward as quickly or as often because there's a stigma associated with males coming forward when a sexual assault happens. Just like there's still a stigma with females, but with the male there's an additional stigma about their masculinity and the homosexuality aspect that they oftentimes feel themselves, although it has nothing to do with that. Sexual assault is about power and control. It's not about the sex. It's power and control. Very hard concept for some people to pick up on, but it really is about the power and control. That's why when you talk about male sexual assault, especially male on male, it still has nothing to do with homosexuality. It's still the power and control and degradation of another individual. So there's a lot of factors that come involved in that, but it definitely spurs conversation. We want conversation. I applaud Noah for doing this, for starting a conversation, with the folks, with the troops, because I think it's very, very important to do, and I'm sure that there will be a lot of conversation generated, from that. Any questions that you have about the film or anything that you saw today?
Thank you so much. This will be really useful to roll out to our fleet. We're starting small, but starting in the right direction. So,
Very good.
cool.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely.